I'm going to go through a basic Node.js setup and doing a Google for Node.js tutorial. The first hit is this Node beginner book. So I go there and scroll down a little. Now you should read through all this. I've already read it and I'm not going to bore you with that, but I'm going to go to the installation and you should read about JavaScript. Hopefully you'll know a little bit more about that. Also, this is not written by a super JavaScript guru, so it should be plain English. I'm going to go ahead and go to the installation, and we're going to look for a Windows installation. And here we go. And we'll go 64 or what else? Precompiled Node for several platforms, Node.js download. I'll go there. I've got Windows, in my case 64-bit. I'm downloading it to my downloads. This is the .msi. And when it's done, go ahead and run it. Now it sees that I already had installed it before. I'm going to go ahead and close it was running before. And let's just pretend that I had a bad installation. I'll repair, but if you're doing this for the first time, you would just do it normally. So wait for this to finish. I'm going to go ahead and pause it. We're almost done. Finish. And now if I look for Node.js on the machine, what I'm going to find is that it basically has gone into my hard drive and installed under program files a folder called Node.js, and inside you have this Node executable. Right? I can run this executable and it gives me essentially a JavaScript command line in which I can do some JavaScript. Try the most obvious, which I don't think works, because it's not in a browser and it doesn't know how to do a pop-up window, but I can do things like console.log yo, and I get yo just like if I were doing it in, say, Chrome by hitting F12. And I can also do something like for var I equals 0, I less than 100, I plus plus, up arrow, console.log I, and now I get, basically I can run it that way. However, what we can also do now is close that and open up the command line. So I'm going to go to the Start menu. Type CMD and get my command line. And then if I type Node, it's also trying to do that. That's again console.log. So we get that, right? So we're basically running Node now because we have this little right-hand caret. Control C, I get out of it. Let's see, Control C again. So I want to navigate to a folder where I put some work, but let me do some work first. So I created a folder in my C drive called Code Play or something like that. So first I go to my C drive, whoops, CD, C, CD, colon backslash. So much for getting how to do this. And I have a directory called code. Code takes me to code. I list what's in there, and I've got one called NodeWork. CD NodeWork. So now I'm in the NodeWork folder, and I can also look at this in Windows Explorer, and I'll go into drive. They're called code, and in there I have node work, and in there I have some files. I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. Very simply, open up Notepad++, make a new file, and I'll just do something really simple, console.log, WAP, yo, and save it as yo.js. I'm in the node work folder, and I go back to the, remember I'm in the command line. I made a mistake earlier being in the node window, whereas I'm in the command line, and I type node, which says run node, and I type yo.js, which says use node to run this, and I get an execution there. It's not that big a deal, but we could go in there and do some other stuff like for var I equals 0, I less than 10,000, I plus plus, and console.log count is I. This is the kind of stuff you should by now be doing from memory. I'll go ahead and save this, and then I type yo count is, save it, go back to that command line, up arrow runs it again, and now I get a loop that goes to 10,000 rather than 9999, right? So nothing fancy here that we couldn't just do by hitting F12 in Chrome, but we're basically running JavaScript on this machine without running it through a browser. So what we're going to do next is go through the tutorial and look at how we can actually use Node to create a small web server. So we'll go back to that tutorial and nodebeginner.org, and so we did essentially the console log, and we ran Node and so on. Yeah, I used Hello World, and I used Yelp, and then there's all these what they call the full-blown application. Let me make this browser a little bit more to our size. And got this application stack. So we want to serve web pages. We need an HTTP server, and we'll respond to requests. We need some kind of router to fill these requests. We need request handlers, and we need request data handling, and some way of sending this to the browser, and we need upload handling. So we're going to look at these and go a little bit step by step through this. So, and I'm going to leave you to read this, but basically I'm going to go and swipe the code and see what happens. So opening this in use this window a little bit, and open up my text editor at the same time. Now, to be very, very basic, I can just cut and paste and see what happens. I'll copy that, go back to Notepad, and I'll go ahead and make a new file, paste it here. We're going to call this server.js. Actually, they haven't told us what to call it, so let's go with that. Yeah, server.js. Server.js, I save that. And I'm going to clean this up to my standards, which is that I'm going to put my curlies on the same line there. And well, this is interesting because we get into this kind of funkiness, where this is curly brace that defines that function, followed by the parentheses down here. Really, this is kind of what's going on. Kind of drives me nuts because there's too much going on in one place. And the same thing is going on here. You have to find your own kind of comfort level. And let's see what happens with this. So we'll save that. We'll go back to the command line, and we'll type node server.js. And it says, wait, firewall blocked that because I have a firewall installed here, and so I'm going to allow it. V8 is from Chrome. I'll allow access. And I think it's running now. Nothing happens, right? But wait a minute. If it was a web page, what do I expect to happen? So let me go and open up a web page. And the local web page is always called localhost. And I run it, and I don't get that. But the little thing, I can put 8080, and I get this is actually port 8080. And so let me go see what else might have happened. Go back to my instructions. We put that, and it says, oh, 8888. So go back to the browser. 8888, and I get hello world. So what's going on here is that we're running this code, which does a bunch of stuff we're not ready to talk about quite yet. And it creates a web server that essentially will respond to going to localhost, which is the same, by the way, as going to 127.0.0.1. Again, we go there, but if we put port 8888, it's the same. Now let's go back and let's look at the code and see if we can change that to, for example, port 80, which is the standard port for the browser. Save that. Go back and quit this and run it again, and hopefully it's running there. Go back to the browser. We just type localhost without the 88, and it works, right? Because 80 is the default. So I'm curious if it would work if we put nothing at all. So let's see if we can decipher some of this. Require, it means it needs that HTTP, probably from a Node.js library. And we're creating a server using this variable called HTTP. And we're creating this anonymous function. So what I want to do is see if we can, I want to first add some code that makes it a little more like the kind of HTML we know, right? So I could go ahead and put something like response.write bracket dot type HTML, and this is something you would have seen before, and then we always have things like HTML. Title, page, and in the head we have body. So there's a lot of things. I can actually put these on their own lines. Causes me any trouble. It doesn't. There's better ways to do this. Try this out first. Body, H1, node page, blah, blah, blah. So all of this is within this string. I finish that with the close quote and close parentheses in there. So I've done a response.write. And if I coded that right, hopefully it'll just go ahead and run it. I come back. I'm going to go reload the web page and get no change. View the source code and make sure. Sure enough, no change. However, I didn't actually relaunch the web server. Back to the web server. Control C. I run it again. And I get an error. And it's saying, hey, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And this is where debugging comes in handy. And I'm going to guess that I've got some issues. So look at Hello World down here, I notice that Notepad++ has not really dealt with my color coding right. If I switch that to single quote, that doesn't help either. I'll test it by putting the single quote there, and that does work. So it seems that if we're on the same line, we get that. So now I get into a little bit of JavaScript coding. So if I want to just make, I'll call there called output equals, and that output looks like doc type. So all I'm doing is creating a string that has all this in it, and probably just need to kind of put it on the same line to work. And I could make several variables like the top stuff, bottom stuff, and so on. And I'll do the head up in this one thing, close that off, and then I'll do output plus equals, add another quote, body. Again, this is just a way of showing kind of tying what you know as HTML. That off more. And now we do response.write, simply respond the output. So we created a string, and that string has a bunch of HTML in it. And so we save that, go back, run it, and hopefully have cleaner code. And that's running. We go to browser, and we regenerate. And now we have, oh wait, it's generating a straight text. See the source code, and it's rendering as straight text. It's not actually rendering as HTML. That's an interesting problem. Double check. There's no difference. So, did we muck up the HTML? Is it because we didn't save it as an HTML file? What seems to be the problem there? But you can see basically what we've done so far is we're able to output content to a web browser. In this case, the web browser is not rendering it as HTML, likely because it doesn't know that it's HTML. So the content type up here says text plain. I wonder what happens if I change that to say HTML. Well, that's go back to the server, Control X, start it again, back to the browser, regenerate, and oh, suddenly now I have HTML. There's all these little things we want to kind of understand, and in this case, we're getting now proper HTML, and we use the page source. That's what it looks like, and the page is actually rendering it because we told it in the code to render it as HTML. So what else could we do to make this a little bit cleaner? Well, what we've got here is an anonymous. We've basically got this function. It goes all the way from there, right? And that falls inside these parentheses. So what I'm going to do is take these and make them separate. So, and I'll call it function a sure, I'll call it a responder function hope my syntax is right there. So it's probably good to go look up how to declare a function in JavaScript. And take that name. Now that's what I put down in parentheses here. And I'm sure I've totally botched that, but it helps me understand and learn what's going on as I do it. So go back. I expect an error in this case. Control C. Again, and I get all kinds of errors. Like, what are you talking about, right? So first I need to go look up how we want to create a function. Because the way it was before in our code, so, is that we create a server and we pass it this anonymous function. Why is it anonymous? Because it has no name. Right? So let's go look up how to create a function in JavaScript. Expect W3 schools will be first. And here we get in a case. Function, my function, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So actually simpler, but there's several ways to do this. So function, function name, some code to be executed. Okay? And see if there's some other examples. Var, my var equals my function. Okay? So actually that's a different, that's the usage. And yes, I don't think we even need to do all of that. So we'll go back to my code and function request response. So we're defining it as that. And down here we do request response. And we need to give it something there. So let's see if that works a little bit better. I still think we're not quite there. And basically we haven't passed it the right parameters. So in the original example, it's automatically getting request response. And in the case where I've rewritten it, it doesn't have that there. I haven't dug myself too much of a hole. And see what happens if I just give it request. Maybe these exist already. And I'm deciding that's a lousy name for the function. I'm gonna I want to come up with a name that's meaningful of what this is actually doing. It's creating a server, and what is it doing with that server? It's creating a server and accepting a function, doing all this stuff. So let's do maybe IO because it requests and it responds, and we'll call it an IO function. Right? So I'm going to name it function server IO. Down here we'll call it server IO. And let's see what happens there. Save it. Back. Save it. And doesn't run. Because it doesn't know what request response is. It would be nice if I remember to just read ahead enough. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to pass the function directly. I called it server IO. And I'm passing it server IO because you can pass a function. So I save that. I haven't pressed it again. So go back, run it, and now it's running. I go back and refresh, and it's running. And to make sure, just because I'm kind of paranoid like that, I'll add another paragraph here. Or Control S, go back to console, Control C, up arrow run again, go back to browser, refresh, and we get the second paragraph. So if we go to the beginner book, it actually explains with refactoring. And I would prefer to have seen code like this to begin with, but now we have something very similar to what I just coded, except we switched it to port 80, so it opens by default, and we switched it to text./HTML and added some more HTML. Right? So now you can read through a lot of this, but these are some of the advantages and things. But basically, we've just got it running right now. And we can go to database and so on. So later on, you can go through this and get a lot of it to work. But the first step is going to get to the point where we basically are loading up web pages through Node.js running locally. And I think here it suggests that we can add one more little bit. So console.log server has started. And where else did they put it? Request received. So we can put that to kind of give us a sense of what's going on. And we'll put the request received. Console server has started at the end here, which means it's running. And then another one right here was request received right after the on request. And I think I have not yet added that code, right? We've got right head, right, and end. We've got head, right in here. Save this again. Go back. Control C, restart it. And now we notice we have a note that says server has started. And we go back to the browser and refresh. And refresh 3 times. Refresh again. And now I go back to the console. And I said got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it seems to be doing a request. Let's see if we can get this window to open. Same time, go here and watch that window. And each refresh generates 2 requests, which is also interesting. Likely because we've got, I'm not sure, we've got 3 responses, but maybe the end doesn't count. Right? And looks like this right head is actually going more into the metadata of the page. But anyway, there you have that part. So that's enough, hopefully, to get you started. Hopefully you've already managed to do that. There's more things here that we can look at it.